The blood dripped from Elena's wrists onto the dusty floorboards of the abandoned mining shack, each drop a crimson reminder of her desperate fight against the ropes that bound her to the wooden post. She had stopped screaming hours ago when the sun was still high over Rawhide, Nevada, and her captors had ridden off to collect the ransom from her father, leaving her alone in this God-forsaken place with nothing but the sound of her own ragged breathing and the whisper of wind through the broken walls. The year was 1883, and Elena Shaw had learned the hard way that traveling from Carson City without proper protection was a fool's errand. But she had been too stubborn to listen, too convinced that her father's reputation as a successful cattle rancher would keep her safe on the open road. The door crashed open with such force that Elena's head snapped up, her dark eyes wide with terror as she prepared for her captors to return. Instead, a tall figure filled the doorway, backlit by the orange glow of sunset, and for a moment she thought perhaps death itself had come to claim her. The man stepped inside, his spurs jingling softly against the floor, and she could make out the weathered features of a cowboy in his late 20s, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of a stormy sky. He wore a dusty brown hat pulled low over his brow, and his hand rested on the gun at his hip as he surveyed the scene before him. "Jesus," he breathed, and crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. Owen Thorne had been tracking the Delaney gang for 2 weeks, ever since they had robbed the bank in Virginia City and killed the sheriff's deputy in cold blood. He had not expected to find a woman tied up in their hideout, bleeding and half-conscious from her ordeal. "Easy now, I'm going to get you loose." Elena flinched as his hands reached for the ropes, her body operating on pure instinct after hours of captivity. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming, "please don't hurt me." "I'm not going to hurt you," Owen said gently, his fingers working at the complicated knots that bound her wrists. "My name is Owen Thorne. I'm a bounty hunter, and I've been tracking the men who did this to you. How long have you been here?" "Since morning," Elena managed to say, wincing as the ropes finally came loose and blood rushed back into her hands. The pain was excruciating, and she would have collapsed if Owen had not caught her against his chest, one strong arm supporting her weight as he examined her injured wrists in the fading light. "These are bad," he said, his jaw tightening as he took in the raw, bleeding flesh where she had fought against her bonds. "You fought hard." "I thought if I could just get free before they came back," Elena said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks now that someone was there to witness them. "My father, they said they were going to kill him if he didn't pay them $5,000. Owen guided her to sit on an old crate in the corner, then knelt before her and pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket. "Your father is Thomas Shaw, the rancher from Carson City." When she nodded, he continued, "The gang that took you, they're called the Delaney brothers. There's 4 of them, and they're wanted for robbery and murder across 3 territories. They won't hurt your father as long as they think they can get money from him, but we need to get you out of here before they come back." "You're going to help me?" Elena asked, searching his face for any sign of deception. She had learned not to trust easily, but there was something solid and dependable in Owen Thorne's steady gaze that made her want to believe him. "I'm going to do more than help you," Owen said, carefully wrapping the handkerchief around her right wrist, his touch surprisingly gentle for such a rough-looking man. "I'm going to make sure those men never hurt anyone again, but first we need to get these wounds tended properly. Can you ride?" Elena nodded, though in truth she was not certain her legs would support her weight. Owen must have seen the doubt in her eyes because he produced a canteen from his belt and held it to her lips. The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was the most wonderful thing Elena had ever experienced. She drank greedily until Owen pulled it away with a small smile. "Slow down, or you'll make yourself sick," he said, then went back to bandaging her left wrist with another piece of cloth he tore from his own shirt. Elena watched his face as he worked, noting the small scar above his right eyebrow and the way his jaw clenched with concentration. He had kind eyes, she thought, the kind of eyes that had seen hard things but had not been hardened by them. "Why are you hunting them?" she asked, needing to fill the silence with something other than the sound of her own thundering heartbeat. "Is it just for the bounty money?" Owen's hand stilled for a moment, and something dark passed across his features before he resumed his work. "The Delaney brothers killed my brother 6 months ago in a saloon in Austin. He was a deputy marshal, just doing his job, and they shot him in the back because he got too close to figuring out who they were. The bounty money is nice, but I'd track them to the ends of the earth for free if it meant bringing them to justice." "I'm sorry," Elena said softly, placing her free hand over his. Owen looked up at her, surprised by the gesture, and for a moment something passed between them, a recognition of shared pain and the beginning of something neither of them could name. "I lost my mother 2 years ago to fever. I know what it's like to lose someone you love." "Then you understand why I have to finish this," Owen said, tying off the makeshift bandage and standing. He offered her his hand and pulled her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. "My horse is outside. We're going to ride to Rawhide, get you to the doctor, and then I'm going to send a telegram to your father letting him know you're safe. After that, I'm coming back here to wait for those sons of guns to return." "You can't face 4 men alone," Elena protested, gripping his arm. "That's suicide. Come with me to Rawhide and get the sheriff to help you." Owen shook his head, his expression grim. "The sheriff in Rawhide is old and half-blind. By the time he could round up a posse, the Delaneys would be long gone. No, this is something I have to do myself." "It's what my brother would have wanted." Elena wanted to argue, but the determined set of Owen's jaw told her it would be pointless. Instead, she allowed him to lead her outside where a beautiful chestnut mare waited patiently, reins tied to a scraggly bush. The sun had nearly set, painting the Nevada desert in shades of purple and gold, and Elena took a moment to breathe in the cool evening air, grateful to be free. Owen mounted first, then reached down and pulled Elena up behind him with surprising ease. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against his broad back, and felt some of the terror of the day begin to ebb away. He smelled of leather and sage, and something uniquely masculine that made her feel safe for the first time in hours. "Hold on tight," Owen said, and spurred his horse into a gallop. They rode through the gathering darkness, following a trail that only Owen seemed to be able to see in the dim light. Elena closed her eyes and focused on the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the solid warmth of the man in front of her. She had heard stories of bounty hunters, rough men who lived by the gun and cared for nothing but money, but Owen Thorne seemed different. He had taken the time to bandage her wounds when he could have simply cut her loose and left her to fend for herself. He had spoken to her with kindness and respect, treating her like a person rather than an inconvenience. They reached Rawhide just as the last light faded from the sky. The town was small, barely more than a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a single main street, but to Elena it looked like paradise. Owen guided his horse to the doctor's office, a neat white building with a painted sign hanging above the door, and dismounted before helping Elena down. Her legs nearly buckled beneath her, but Owen caught her again, his strong hands on her waist. "I've got you," he murmured, and Elena believed him. The doctor, a middle-aged man with wire-rimmed spectacles and ink-stained fingers, took one look at Elena's wrists and ushered them inside. His name was Dr. Pemberton, and he clucked his tongue disapprovingly as he examined Owen's makeshift bandages. "You did a decent job with what you had," Dr. Pemberton said to Owen, "but these wounds need proper cleaning and dressing. Young lady, this is going to sting something fierce." "Mr. Thorne, perhaps you should wait outside." "I'll stay," Elena said quickly, reaching for Owen's hand. "Please, I want him to stay." Owen looked surprised but nodded and positioned himself beside the examination table where Elena sat. Dr. Pemberton worked efficiently, cleaning the raw flesh with carbolic acid that burned like hellfire. Elena bit her lip hard enough to draw blood, determined not to cry out, but when the pain became too much, Owen took her hand in his and squeezed gently. "Look at me," he said softly, and Elena fixed her gaze on his storm-gray eyes. "Tell me about your home. What's it like in Carson City?" Elena understood what he was doing, giving her something to focus on besides the pain, and she was grateful. "We have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town," she said, her voice shaking only slightly. 300 head of cattle and the prettiest view of the Sierra Nevada mountains you ever saw. My father built the house himself after my mother died, said he needed something to keep his hands busy. It has a wide front porch where we sit in the evenings and watch the sun set." "Sounds peaceful," Owen said, his thumb stroking the back of her hand in a gesture that was probably meant to be comforting, but sent shivers up Elena's spine for entirely different reasons. "What were you doing on the road alone?" "I was visiting my aunt in Virginia City," Elena explained, wincing as Dr. Pemberton wrapped her wrists in clean white bandages. "She's been ill, and I stayed with her for a month to help care for her. My father was supposed to send one of our ranch hands to escort me home, but I got impatient and decided to hire a coach instead. We were about halfway to Carson City when the Delaney brothers stopped us. They killed the driver and took me." Her voice broke on the last words and she looked away, ashamed of her tears. "Hey," Owen said gently, using his free hand to turn her face back toward his. "None of this is your fault. You hear me? Those men are animals and they're going to pay for what they did." Dr. Pemberton finished his work and stepped back, surveying his handiwork with satisfaction. "The wounds are clean now, and I've applied a salve that should help them heal. Change the bandages twice a day and keep them dry. You're a lucky young woman, Miss Shaw. Another few hours and you might have done permanent damage." "Thanks to Mr. Thorne," Elena said, looking at Owen with such open gratitude that he felt his chest tighten. "He saved my life." "Just doing what any decent man would do," Owen said gruffly, suddenly uncomfortable with her praise. He paid the doctor and helped Elena to her feet, noting with concern how pale she still looked. "Let's get you to the hotel and some food. You need rest." "What about the telegram to my father?" Elena asked as they walked out into the cool night air. Rawhide's Main Street was quiet, with only a few horses tied up outside the saloon and the sound of a tinny piano drifting through the darkness. "I'll send it first thing in the morning," Owen promised. "The telegraph office is closed now. Besides, your father probably hasn't even received the ransom demand yet. The Delaneys will need time to reach him, and they'll want to make sure you're still secured before they make their move." They walked to the Rawhide Hotel, a modest 2-story building with peeling paint and crooked shutters. Owen paid for 2 rooms, ignoring Elena's protest that she had money of her own, and escorted her upstairs. Her room was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a faded quilt and a washstand in the corner. "Lock the door behind me," Owen instructed, standing in the doorway. "Don't open it for anyone except me or the hotel owner, Mrs. Chen. She's a tiny Chinese woman with gray hair, can't miss her. I'll be right next door if you need anything." "You're really going back there tonight, aren't you?" Elena asked, dreading his answer. To that mining shack. Owen nodded slowly. I have to. The Delaney's will come back when they realize you're gone, and I need to be there waiting for them. It's my only chance to get the drop on all four of them at once. Then take me with you, Elena said impulsively. I can help. I can shoot. My father taught me. Absolutely not, Owen said firmly. You've been through enough today. You need rest and safety, not more danger. I work alone, Miss Shaw. Always have, always will. Elena stepped closer to him, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. What if something happens to you? What if they kill you? I'll be stuck here with no way to get home, and your brother's death will still be unavenged. At least if I'm there, I can provide backup. You'd be a liability, Owen said bluntly, then softened when he saw the hurt flash across her face. I didn't mean it like that. But you're injured and exhausted, and I can't do my job if I'm worried about keeping you safe. Please, Elena, trust me to handle this. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it made Elena's heart skip. She nodded reluctantly, knowing he was right even if she hated admitting it. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll come back. I promise, Owen said and meant it. He reached out and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek for just a moment longer than necessary. Get some sleep. I'll see you in the morning. Elena watched him walk to his own room and close the door, then locked hers as instructed. She sank onto the bed, every muscle in her body screaming with exhaustion, but found that sleep would not come. Her mind kept replaying the events of the day, from the horror of her capture to the unexpected kindness of Owen Thorne. She barely knew the man, yet something about him had reached past all her defenses and touched a part of her heart she had thought permanently closed after watching her mother waste away from fever. Hours later, Elena gave up trying to sleep and moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light across the empty street below. Somewhere out there, Owen was riding back to that mining shack, preparing to face 4 dangerous men alone. The thought made Elena's stomach churn with anxiety. She should have insisted harder, should have found some way to convince him to wait for proper help. The night passed with agonizing slowness. Elena dozed fitfully in the chair by the window, starting awake at every sound, certain that each creak of the old building was news of Owen's death. When the first gray light of dawn finally appeared on the horizon, she splashed water on her face from the basin and changed her bandages as Dr. Pemberton had instructed. The wounds looked better already, less angry and inflamed, though they still hurt like the devil. A knock on her door made Elena jump. "Miss Shaw, it's Mrs. Chen. I brought you breakfast." Elena opened the door to find a tiny elderly woman with kind eyes holding a tray laden with eggs, bacon, and fresh bread. The smell made Elena's stomach growl loudly, reminding her that she had not eaten since yesterday morning. "Mr. Thorne paid for a week in advance," Mrs. Chen said in accented English, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "He said to take good care of you. He's a good man, that one. Been staying here on and off for months while he hunts those terrible Delaney brothers. Always polite, always pays on time." "Do you know where he is now?" Elena asked, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. Mrs. Chen shook her head. "He left before midnight. Didn't say where he was going, but I can guess. Those brothers, they're bad men. Killed 3 people in Rawhide last year when they robbed the bank. Everyone's afraid of them." After Mrs. Chen left, Elena forced herself to eat, knowing she would need her strength for whatever the day might bring. She had just finished the last of the bread when another knock sounded on her door. This time it was a young boy, barely 12, with a folded piece of paper in his hand. "Telegram for Miss Elena Shaw," he announced importantly, holding out the paper. Elena's hands shook as she unfolded it, recognizing her father's terse style immediately. Received your message. Stop. Thank God you are safe. Stop staying in Rawhide. Stop coming with men. Stop. Arrive. 2 days. Stop. Father. Elena sank onto the bed, relief washing over her. Owen must have sent the telegram before he left, ensuring that her father would know she was alive. 2 days seemed like an eternity, but at least help was coming. Now, if only Owen would return safely, everything might actually turn out all right. The morning crawled by with no sign of the bounty hunter. Elena paced her small room until she thought she might wear a hole in the floorboards, then ventured downstairs to the hotel's small sitting room. Mrs. Chen brought her tea and sat with her for a while, sharing gossip about the town and its inhabitants. Elena tried to pay attention, tried to care about which merchant was courting which widow, but her mind kept drifting to Owen. It was nearly noon when the sound of hoofbeats in the street sent Elena running to the window. Her heart leaped into her throat when she saw Owen's chestnut mare tied outside the sheriff's office across the street, but it took her a moment to spot Owen himself, bloodied and limping but alive. He was speaking to an elderly man wearing a tarnished badge, gesturing emphatically as 3 other men unloaded something from the back of a wagon. Bodies. 4 of them, covered with canvas. Elena did not remember making the decision to leave the hotel. One moment she was at the window, the next she was running across the dusty street, her skirts hiked up around her knees in a most unladylike fashion. Owen looked up as she approached, and his exhausted face broke into a genuine smile. "You're supposed to be resting," he said, but there was no censure in his voice, only warmth. "You're bleeding," Elena countered, taking in the gash on his forehead and the way he was favoring his left side. "What happened?" "Got what I came for," Owen said simply, nodding toward the covered bodies. "The Delaney brothers won't be hurting anyone else. It wasn't easy and I took a few hits, but it's done. It's finally done." The relief in his voice was palpable, and Elena understood that this was about more than just justice or bounty money. This was about closure, about honoring his brother's memory and putting the ghosts of the past to rest. Without thinking, she threw her arms around Owen's neck and hugged him tightly, ignoring the startled looks from the sheriff and his deputies. "Thank God you're all right," she whispered against his chest. "I was so worried." Owen's arms came up to circle her waist, careful of her injured wrists, and he held her as if she were something precious and fragile. "I made you a promise, didn't I? I told you I'd come back." They stood like that for a long moment, oblivious to their audience until the sheriff cleared his throat pointedly. "Mr. Thorne, I'll need you to come inside and give a statement, and then you should probably see the doctor about those injuries." "Go," Elena said, reluctantly stepping back. "I'll wait for you at the hotel." "Actually," Owen said, catching her hand before she could turn away, "I was hoping you'd come with me to the doctor. These wounds aren't as bad as they look, and I'd appreciate the company." Elena smiled and nodded, tucking her hand into the crook of his elbow as if it belonged there. They walked together to Dr. Pemberton's office, leaving the sheriff to deal with the grim task of processing the bodies. The doctor tutted over Owen's injuries much as he had done with Elena's, but pronounced them relatively minor, just cuts and bruises that would heal in time. "You're lucky they didn't shoot you," Dr. Pemberton said as he stitched the gash on Owen's forehead. 4 against 1 is not good odds, even for someone with your reputation. "They never saw me coming," Owen explained, wincing as the needle pierced his skin. "I waited in the rafters of that old mining shack, knew they'd come back to check on their captive. When they found her gone, they panicked, started arguing about what to do. That's when I made my move. Got two of them before they even knew I was there. The other two put up more of a fight, but in the end, justice prevailed." Elena listened to his matter-of-fact recounting of the gunfight and felt a chill run down her spine. Owen Thorne was not a violent man by nature, she sensed, but he was a man who did what needed to be done, no matter the cost to himself. It was a rare and admirable quality, and it made her respect him even more. After Dr. Pemberton finished his work, Owen and Elena walked back to the hotel slowly, neither of them in any hurry to part ways. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces, and Rawhide's Main Street bustled with activity, people going about their daily business unaware of the drama that had unfolded in the desert beyond their town. "Your father is coming for you," Owen said as they reached the hotel steps. "You'll be home soon, back to your normal life. That must be a relief." "It is," Elena agreed, though the thought of leaving Rawhide and never seeing Owen again filled her with unexpected sadness. "What will you do now that your hunt is over?" Owen was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the distant mountains. "I don't rightly know," he admitted. "I've spent the last 6 months focused on nothing but finding the Delaneys. I guess I hadn't thought much beyond that. Might head back to Austin, see if the Marshal Service has any work for me. Or maybe I'll just drift for a while, see where the road takes me." "That sounds lonely," Elena said softly. "It's the life I chose," Owen replied, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice that had not been there before. "Ever since my brother died, I haven't felt like I belonged anywhere. Always figured I'd just keep moving until I found a place that felt like home again." Elena took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "You could come to Carson City. My father is always looking for good men to work the ranch, and we could use someone with your skills to help protect our livestock from rustlers. The pay is decent, and there's a small cabin on the property that's sitting empty. You'd have your own space, your own life, but you'd also have people around who cared about you." Owen turned to look at her, his gray eyes searching her face. "Why would you offer that to a man you barely know?" "Because I'm a good judge of character," Elena said firmly, "and because you saved my life. But mostly because I think you deserve to have a home again, Owen Thorne. You deserve to be happy, not just existing from one bounty to the next. And maybe, if you stayed, we could get to know each other better. I'd like that very much." The vulnerability in her voice made Owen's heart ache. He had spent so long closed off from everyone, convinced that getting close to people would only lead to more pain and loss. But Elena Shaw had somehow slipped past his defenses in the space of a single day. She was brave and kind and beautiful, and the thought of never seeing her again after her father arrived made him feel hollow inside. "I'd like that too," he said quietly, and watched Elena's face light up with joy. "But I should warn you, I'm not easy company. I have nightmares sometimes about my brother and all the things I've seen. And I'm not used to staying in one place for long. I might get restless." "Then we'll deal with those things together," Elena said, taking both his hands in hers despite the pain in her wrists. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Owen. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." Owen pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers, and for the first time in months, he felt something that might have been hope stirring in his chest. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is," Elena whispered. "Maybe we're both overthinking this. All I know is that when I'm with you, I feel safe. I feel like maybe everything is going to be all right after all. Is that so wrong?" "No," Owen said and kissed her gently, mindful of everything she had been through. Elena melted into him, her arms winding around his neck, and the kiss deepened until they were both breathless. When they finally broke apart, Owen was grinning like a fool and Elena was laughing. "I think maybe we should continue this conversation somewhere more private," she said, glancing at the curious faces peering at them from the hotel windows. "Mrs. Chen is probably going to talk about this for weeks." They spent the rest of the day together, talking and laughing and discovering all the little things that made each other unique. Owen told Elena about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk and becoming one of the best trackers in 3 territories. Elena shared stories about her childhood in Carson City, about her mother's gentle wisdom and her father's gruff affection. They talked about their dreams and fears, their hopes for the future, and with each passing hour, the connection between them grew stronger. That evening, they had dinner together in the hotel's small dining room, and Owen was struck by how natural it felt to sit across from Elena, to share a meal and conversation as if they had been doing it for years rather than days. She had changed into a fresh dress that Mrs. Chen had loaned her, a simple blue cotton that brought out the warmth in her dark eyes, and Owen thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "Tell me about your brother," Elena said gently, reaching across the table to take Owen's hand. "What was he like?" Owen's smile was bittersweet. "Ethan was younger than me by 3 years, but you'd never know it by the way he acted. Always trying to look out for me, always getting into trouble because he couldn't stand to see injustice go unchallenged. He became a deputy marshal because he wanted to make the world a better place, not for the glory or the money. He was a good man, Elena, the best man I ever knew, and those animals shot him down like he was nothing just because he was in their way. He'd be proud of you," Elena said firmly. "You avenged him, brought his killers to justice. That takes courage and dedication. But I think he'd also want you to move on to find happiness again. Don't you think?" "I think you're right," Owen admitted. "Ethan always said I took things too seriously, that I needed to learn how to live instead of just surviving. Maybe it's time I listened to him." The next 2 days passed in a blur of companionship and growing affection. Owen barely left Elena's side, helping her change her bandages, walking with her around Rawhide, introducing her to the few people in town he had gotten to know during his months of hunting. Elena learned that beneath Owen's rough exterior was a thoughtful, intelligent man with a dry sense of humor and a deep capacity for loyalty. Owen discovered that Elena was not just beautiful but also clever and resourceful, with a strength of character that matched his own. On the afternoon of the second day, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, heralding the arrival of Thomas Shaw and his men. Elena and Owen stood outside the hotel, waiting, and Elena felt her nervousness grow as the riders drew closer. What if her father did not approve of Owen? What if he forbade her from seeing the bounty hunter again? Thomas Shaw was a big man in his late 50s, with iron-gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades spent working under the harsh Nevada sun. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped and pulled Elena into a crushing embrace, his whole body shaking with relief. "Thank God, thank God," he kept repeating, and Elena felt tears stream down her face as she held her father tight. "When I got that telegram saying you'd been taken, I thought I'd lost you too. I couldn't have survived that, little girl. I couldn't have survived losing you like I lost your mother." "I'm all right, Papa," Elena assured him, pulling back so he could see her face. "I'm safe, thanks to this man." She gestured to Owen, who had stepped back to give them privacy. "Papa, this is Owen Thorne. He's the bounty hunter who rescued me from the Delaney brothers and made sure I got to safety." Thomas Shaw turned to Owen, his sharp blue eyes taking in every detail of the younger man. Owen met his gaze steadily, not flinching under the scrutiny. Finally, Thomas extended his hand. "Mr. Thorne, I owe you a debt I can never repay," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You saved my daughter's life. If there's anything you need, anything at all, you only have to ask." Actually, sir, there is something, Owen said, shaking Thomas's hand firmly. Your daughter mentioned that you might have worked for a man with my skills. I'm looking to settle down, maybe put down some roots. If the offer still stands, I'd like to come work for you. Thomas's eyebrows rose in surprise, and he glanced at Elena, who was blushing furiously. Is that so? And would this sudden desire to settle down have anything to do with my daughter? It would, sir, Owen admitted, seeing no point in lying. I know we've only known each other a few days, but Elena is the finest woman I've ever met. I'd like the chance to court her properly, with your permission. I don't have much to offer right now, except my word that I'll work hard and treat her with the respect she deserves. But if you give me time, I'll build something worthy of her. The silence stretched out until Elena thought she might scream from the tension. Then Thomas Shaw threw back his head and laughed, a deep booming sound that startled several nearby horses. You've got nerve, Thorne, I'll give you that, he said, clapping Owen on the shoulder hard enough to make him stagger. Most men would dance around the subject for weeks before getting to the point. I respect a man who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to ask for it. All right, you can come work for me and you can court my daughter, but I'll be watching you, understand? If you hurt her, if you make her unhappy in any way, there won't be a place in this territory where you can hide from me. I wouldn't expect anything less, sir, Owen said solemnly. I swear to you, I'll do everything in my power to make Elena happy. Good, Thomas said, then turned to his daughter. And you, young lady, we're going to have a long talk about taking off without proper protection. But that can wait until we get you home. Are you well enough to travel? I'm fine, Papa, Elena assured him, holding up her bandaged wrists. The doctor says these will heal completely in a few weeks, and I'm ready to go home. I've missed the ranch terribly. The journey back to Carson City took 3 days, with the group traveling at a steady but cautious pace. Owen rode beside Elena the entire way, and Thomas Shaw observed their growing closeness with a mixture of amusement and approval. He had been worried about his daughter ever since his wife's death, concerned that Elena was closing herself off from the world, protecting her heart at the cost of her happiness. But this Owen Thorne fellow seemed to have broken through her defenses without even trying, and Thomas could see the light back in his daughter's eyes. The Shaw Ranch was everything Elena had described and more. The main house was a sprawling 2-story structure built of sturdy timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides and offered stunning views of the Sierra Nevada mountains in the distance. The land stretched for miles in every direction, dotted with grazing cattle and bordered by pine forests that seemed to go on forever. Owen was given the cabin Elena had mentioned, a small but comfortable structure about a quarter-mile from the main house. It had a bedroom, a sitting area with a stone fireplace, and a small kitchen that looked barely used. Thomas explained that it had belonged to his former foreman, who had retired the previous year, and moved to San Francisco to live with his daughter. It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you work for me, Thomas said, watching as Owen examined his new home. You'll start tomorrow, helping with the cattle drive to the north pasture. We've got about 50 head that need moving, and I want to see what you can do before I give you more responsibility. Owen proved himself quickly. He was an excellent rider and roper, with an instinctive understanding of cattle that came from years of experience. The other ranch hands, initially suspicious of the newcomer, soon came to respect his skills and his willingness to do any job, no matter how dirty or difficult. Within a month, Thomas had promoted Owen to assistant foreman, putting him in charge of coordinating the hands and overseeing the daily operations of the ranch. But it was Owen's courtship of Elena that truly won Thomas Shaw's approval. Owen was patient and respectful, never pushing Elena beyond what she was comfortable with, but also making his intentions clear. He brought her wildflowers he picked on his morning rides and sat with her on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. He helped her with the household accounts when Thomas was too busy, and taught her how to shoot better, setting up targets in the field and patiently correcting her stance. Elena blossomed under Owen's attention. The nightmares she had suffered after her kidnapping gradually faded, replaced by dreams of a future filled with love and laughter. She had never expected to fall in love, had resigned herself to remaining a spinster who helped her father run the ranch, but Owen had changed everything. He made her feel cherished and valued, not just as Thomas Shaw's daughter but as Elena, a woman with her own thoughts and desires and dreams. 6 months after Owen arrived at the ranch, he asked Elena to marry him. It was evening, and they were sitting on the porch of his cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. "Elena," Owen said, taking her hand in his, "these past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. You've given me something I never thought I'd have again, a place to belong, a reason to look forward to tomorrow. I love you more than I ever thought possible to love another person. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made me?" Elena's answer was to kiss him with all the passion and love in her heart. "Yes," she breathed against his lips. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the ranch, with the local minister presiding and all the ranch hands in attendance. Elena wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in tissue paper for nearly 20 years, and Owen wore a new suit that Thomas had insisted on buying for him. Thomas walked Elena down the makeshift aisle they had set up in the main house's parlor, and when he placed her hand in Owen's, there were tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. The years that followed were filled with hard work and deep contentment. Owen and Elena moved into the main house when Thomas's health began to decline, caring for him in his final years with the same devotion he had shown them. When Thomas passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68, he did so knowing that his daughter was loved and that the ranch he had built would be in good hands. Elena gave birth to their first child, a son they named Ethan Thomas, 2 years after their wedding. Owen held his son for the first time with tears in his eyes, thinking about his brother and how proud he would have been to have a nephew named after him. 3 years later, a daughter arrived, whom they named Mary Rose after Elena's mother. The children grew up strong and healthy, learning to ride and rope almost before they could walk, just as their father had done. Owen proved to be an exceptional rancher, expanding the Shaw holdings and earning a reputation as one of the most honest and fair cattle ranchers in Nevada. He never forgot his roots as a bounty hunter, though, and occasionally worked with the local sheriff to track down rustlers and thieves. But he always came home to Elena, to their children, to the life they had built together. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the ranch was settled for the night, Owen and Elena would sit together on the porch, holding hands and watching the sun set over the mountains. Elena would sometimes touch the faint scars on her wrists, reminders of that terrible day when she had fought against her bonds until her wrists bled. But those scars no longer represented trauma and fear. Instead, they were symbols of survival and strength, proof that even the darkest moments could lead to the brightest futures. You ever think about how different things would be if you hadn't tracked the Delaney brothers to that mining shack? Elena asked one evening, resting her head on Owen's shoulder. "All the time," Owen admitted, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I think about how close I came to losing you before I even found you. If I had been a day later, if I had chosen a different path, our whole lives would be different. We might never have met. But we did meet, Elena said firmly, and we fell in love and we built this beautiful life together. That's what matters, not what might have been, but what is. Owen pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. She was right, of course. The past was the past, with all its pain and loss and regret. But the present was theirs, filled with love and family and purpose. And the future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. As the years passed and their children grew, Owen and Elena never lost the closeness they had forged in those early days. They worked side by side on the ranch, making decisions together, supporting each other through good times and bad. When young Ethan announced his intention to become a lawman like his uncle, Owen felt a moment of fear, remembering how his brother had died. But Elena took his hand and reminded him that their son was his own man, with his own path to follow, and that they had raised him to be strong and smart and capable of handling whatever life threw at him. Mary Rose, their daughter, fell in love with the son of a neighboring rancher when she was 22. Owen walked her down the aisle with mixed emotions, proud of the woman she had become, but also mourning the loss of his little girl. Elena laughed at him later that night, calling him sentimental, but she was crying too, and they held each other and marveled at how quickly time had passed. Grandchildren arrived in due course, filling the ranch house with noise and laughter. Owen discovered that being a grandfather was even better than being a father, with all the joy and none of the constant worry. He taught his grandchildren to ride and rope, just as he had taught his own children, and told them stories about the old days, about outlaws and bounty hunters and the wild Nevada frontier. Elena remained beautiful to Owen, even as her dark hair turned silver and lines appeared at the corners of her eyes. She was still the brave, stubborn woman who had asked a stranger to take her with him into danger, still the compassionate soul who had seen past his rough exterior to the lonely, hurting man beneath. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together family and friends from across the territory. And Owen stood before the assembled crowd and told them all that marrying Elena Shaw had been the best decision he had ever made. "She saved my life just as surely as I saved hers," he said, his arm around Elena's waist. "I was lost when we met, adrift and purposeless, but she gave me a home and a family and a reason to be grateful for each new day. Everything good in my life started the moment I walked into that mining shack and saw her fighting against those ropes. She's the strongest, bravest, most loving person I've ever known, and I thank God every day that I was the one who found her." Elena wept openly at his words, and when the party was over and they were alone together in their bedroom, she showed him with kisses and caresses just how much his love meant to her. They had not lost the passion that had ignited between them all those years ago. If anything, it had deepened and matured, becoming something richer and more profound than the hot spark of new attraction. In their later years, when Owen's hair had turned completely gray and Elena needed a cane to walk comfortably, they would still sit together on the porch every evening, watching the sunset and talking about their lives. Their children had taken over the daily operations of the ranch, allowing Owen and Elena to finally rest and enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. "We've had a good life," Owen said one evening, his gnarled hand clasped around Elena's. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "We have," Elena agreed, smiling at him with eyes still bright with love. "And we're not done yet. I plan to be sitting on this porch with you for many more years, Owen Thorne. You're not getting rid of me that easily." Owen laughed and pulled her close, marveling at the fact that even after all these years, holding Elena still felt like coming home. They had built something real and lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. Their children and grandchildren would carry on the legacy they had created, and the love story that had begun in blood and terror in that dusty mining shack would be told for generations. As the sun finally dipped below the mountains, painting the Nevada sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Owen and Elena sat together in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against all odds and had chosen to build a life together. The scars on Elena's wrists had long since faded to barely visible lines, but neither of them would ever forget the day they met, or the way a simple act of kindness and compassion had changed both their lives forever. They had survived outlaws and hardship, loss and grief, but through it all, they had held onto each other. And in the end, that was what mattered most. Not the ranch or the money or the success they had achieved, but the love they shared, the family they had created, and the countless moments of joy and connection that had filled their years together. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Nevada sky, Owen helped Elena to her feet, and together they walked inside, hand in hand, just as they had done thousands of times before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new blessings, but they would face it together, as they had faced everything else. And when their time finally came to leave this world, they would do so knowing that they had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would endure for generations to come.